Speaking of which, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the 2023 annual report, which was handed out at the meeting, and the numbers are not good. It appears that membership dues were down $21.4 million in 2023 compared to 2022. Total expenses exceeded total revenue by $26.8 million. And then, let's start with those. What do you make of that? That's continuing a downward trend.
Sure.
That's already been going.
As I predicted, I think on the show before, and I've certainly written about it or whatever, that the rate of change continued to increase. We've got to turn that around right now. When you look at 17, it's here, 18's here, 19's here, 20's here, and we're on the vertical drop right now because it's like a big curve. We've got the membership need to know that there are good people in places of authority and decision making, that we are dedicated to being good stewards to your money, that we will do the very best we can with this, and we've got to stay alive so that we can rebuild the association. What was it, 3 years ago when the bankruptcy was dismissed? I said this was tragic because the next one's going to be real. I'm afraid it's pretty close to getting real.
Yeah. Speaking of that, what was also disclosed in the annual report was actually from earlier this year. The NRA has sold off in two different transactions $44.6 million worth of assets, which they used in part to pay down line of credit at the bank that they do business with. And then the rest, it just says, went to the operating fund. Where that money went from there. Yeah. Where that money went from there, of course, a lot of it went to the attorneys. So, because that's the number one expense. The number one line item was administrative legal fees at $48 million this year, right. 2023. So, and
that we can all talk about the source of why we've had to spend that much money because of the mistakes made by others. But we've got to get out of that. We got to get back to the business of doing what NRA does. And that means we have to restore the funding. We have to hire the people, and we have to start the programs back up again, because most of them are pretty much in mothballs as far as I can tell. We'll know more by our next board meeting. This one was just basically about the elections. We'll get more data, I hope. With the new EVP, the board will be much better informed, I expect, than we have been in the last 3 years. That's for sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about the new EVP in your opinion? Doug Hamlin, he's run the publications division at the NRA, so he's not an outsider or anything. He hasn't been a public reform advocate to this point. What's your opinion of him? Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Well, the opinion that I have and that I've heard from others is essentially that he's a good manager, that he's been able to keep the magazines going well, that he works and plays well with others, that, he can be collaborative. He can be, I think he has an insight into how the association is run and where all the levers of power are, because he's been there long enough that he's been able to gather that kind of information. And because of his past experience, we thought that he could hit the ground running because he knows where everything is and what is. He's not going to have to learn the job. He's already got all the information necessary to do it. And I believe he's motivated to do it too. I had a good conversation with him this last weekend, and that's one of the reasons he got my vote.
Okay. I invited him to come on the show. Haven't heard back yet, although he did talk to me after being elected at the board meeting. So that was a good sign, I think.
Yes, I think so too.
He'd be more willing to speak and answer questions than previous leadership has been. And he did promise many of the things along the lines that you're talking about: transparency, change in direction, a new NRA. So
all the votes we took last weekend on day before yesterday on the board meeting, I think the very first vote was the most instrumental one, and that was where we refused to go into executive session. Because that's the way they have done business in the past. and we are going to be open and transparent, and we were able to block that request. There was an appropriate executive session on serious financial issues like we're talking about here today, and some personnel stuff, as I recall. But most of the reports were given outside of executive session, and the election was outside of executive session. So the members would get to know exactly what went on in the meeting.
Yes, members were allowed in for these elections, and they were that was one of the things that Hamlin pointed to as an example of the way they're going to act in the future. Obviously, I will certainly be following you all to make sure
I'm
that
sure.
that's